Well, Masters of Chaldea, I hope after the descent of Archetype Earth you have enough Saint Chord stocked up in your collection, because now we have quite possibly the 3 best banners of the year back to back to back, with Lady Avalon, or Proto Merlin, depending on what you want to call her, leading the charge of these banners. And it also helps that all of the banner units alongside the 5 stars are very good as well, except for Gareth. I really don't know what the bias against her was, but apparently there's somebody at Lasengel that just really has it out for her. Now, I am going to put this out here at the beginning of the video that I will be avoiding doing any direct comparisons between Proto Merlin and the original Merlin, because I want the topic of this video to stay on point. You know, you're watching this video because you want to know how good Proto Merlin is and how do you use her and whether or not she's worth summoning for your account, not how does she interact with the original Merlin and who's technically got the better kit. That's going to be its own video that I'm going to be putting out later, because it might seem like a very obvious and straightforward answer, but with actual use cases, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But regardless, we're not going to be doing really any comparisons. We're just going to be strictly talking about Proto Merlin and how good she is and whether or not you should be summoning for her. However, this video is sponsored by LD Emulator, and if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, you know that is the emulator I've been using for about the last 2 years, because not only does it just run better than most other emulators in my experience, but you also can run games in 60 to 120 frames per second, and in fact, that's what you're going to be seeing in the background of this video and pretty much every video going forward from now on, because it just makes the game look so buttery smooth. It's just really nice to look at when you can run this game at 120 frames per second, and there's no charge. It's not like there's a premium version or you have to buy the emulator or anything. All you have to do is download it using my link down in the description down below, and boom, you've got yourself pretty much the best emulator on the market for absolutely free, and you get to run games at 120 frames per second. Who doesn't want to do that? So check them out in the description and also probably the top comment as well. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice with Lady Avalon is her classing as a Pretender class servant, which is a little bit weird because we have Oberon, who sure can act as a support, but you can also use him as a DPS as he is Black Grail compliant, and the same thing can be said for Hephaestus, who is also a pretty decent DPS as a Pretender. But Lady Avalon, I would say, uses her Pretender classing in a fairly, I would say, unique way, in the fact that she's going to be pretty much type neutral against most of the game, not offensively, but defensively, which is very important as one of your supports, because you've been to a fight, right, where you have your Merlin or your Castoria and you're fighting an enemy rider and you're always within a 1 or 2 shot range from just random crits they might do, and that could be a little stressful and it can be a little annoying whenever you get unlucky and they just pop your support twice, or you're using Koyanskaya and you're fighting a caster boss, right, and a similar thing happens. Lady Avalon being neutral towards most of the game is going to be very convenient for her as a support, because it just means she's going to be less likely to get taken out by random crits, especially because of how her NP works. So that is something you should be aware of. Now, we normally talk about the hits as well towards the beginning of somebody's kit, but she's a support. The most important thing is not the actual hits on the cards, the NP gain, the star gen. It's just that she has 3 arts cards. You're going to be using her in arts teams anyway, so the fact that she's providing extra arts cards so everybody can gen that additional 20% in arts brave chains is really the most important thing here. But now, we usually don't talk about passive skills over here on the channel, because most of the time it's like, oh, here's magic resistance, 17% debuff immunity. I mean, well, whoop-de-doo. I'm sure that's, I mean, it's nice, but it's a passive skill, something you don't really think about. But she has something in particular that is very good that you must be aware of when you use her. So, for one, there's the mixed blood ability. It's like Merlin's Incubus ability, where they just get passive 5% NP every single turn. It makes them really nice with Prisma Cosmos, especially if it's max limit broken. Getting 15% back every single turn is an absolute killer. But you'll notice that she starts off with 20% of her NP charged, and that, with her second and third skill, pretty much allows her to immediately fire her NP as soon as the fight starts, which for someone like her or Merlin is an absolute godsend of an ability to have, because they have those NPs that just give you all the generic good stuff you could ever want, and so you want that firing, you want that up at all times. You want to make sure that is always available, and the fact that you can just shoot it out there, that's not nothing. That makes her really, really good off rip. And because we're talking about the passive skill, we're actually going to work in reverse order. We're going to start with her third skill and explain how this works, because it is the third skill that allows her to fire her NP in conjunction with the passive skill immediately. Because what this does is it's the same AoE invincibility skill you all know and love. You know, it's a panic button where if your Castoria doesn't have her third skill available, or the NP is just not quite there, which you will find yourself in every now and then, especially if the enemy is draining your NP or something along those lines. Or maybe they slapped you with an NP seal and Castoria's debuff cleanse is on her NP, so you're kind of stuck right there. You can't access the solemn defense. You at least have a panic button on the third skill to keep the entire party safe, which again is not nothing. That is very, very strong. But the other effect on this is that per enemy that you are fighting, Lady Avalon is going to charge her NP gauge by 20%. So you're fighting 3 enemies, 60%. Fighting 1 enemy, 20%, right? But the nice thing is, this also stacks with her append skill, right? Which, I mean, obviously you can go for like NP5 immediately, so you have all the servant coins you could ever want, or if you're a normal person, you're probably just going to get her bonded up to like bond 8 or bond 9, get that append skill done, and then your Lady Avalon is starting off with 40% NP, plus at bare minimum an additional 20% from her third skill, and then 20% from her second skill. That's 80% on her own. Then you're probably bringing a friend Castoria or your own Castoria. Her charisma gets you to 100% even against 1 enemy. So you may have been thinking, well, this only works on 3 guys. No, no, no. It's really good against anybody because of how the arts units all interact with one another. It is so good. And remember, it's not just this scaling battery depending on enemies. It's still also the invincibility for the entire party, and she pretty much prevents every single enemy that gets hit with this skill from gaining a tick of NP. So essentially buying you an additional turn against your opponent's NPs, which does make this less punishing as a turn 1 open, because you think about somebody like, say, Merlin, who has a skill like this, you want to save that for when you actually need that. But for Lady Avalon, you want to fire this and get that NP going immediately. But she kind of makes up for it. Since you're denying them 1 tick of NP, you kind of get a free turn cooldown on this as well, so you're not really going to be caught in those tight spots, as long as, again, you're managing your Castoria NP and her third skill as well to kind of keep your guys alive. But she does make up for that issue of quote-unquote wasting this skill, because you're going for the battery, because she denies your enemies getting that extra tick, so she buys you an extra turn. And then I guess if we're working backwards, we can go just look at the second skill as well. This is just a very, very powerful charisma skill, giving the entire party 20% attack, 20% NP, and then it gives everybody 1 stage of overcharge for 1 stage for 1 time for 3 turns, effectively meaning that your Castoria at bare minimum, even if she's leading the NP Brave chain, is still going to give everybody 2 hits of solemn defense. Or if you want to put her at the back, you could easily max out on her giving everybody 4 to 5 hits of solemn defense, which starts to get a little bit ridiculous, especially because Lady Avalon also plugs up the sustainability issues that Castoria has. Because Castoria does so many things, the only thing she doesn't do is provide a heal, and that is where Lady Avalon comes in. But she also helps arts gain access to those Morgan and Himiko style of gameplays, where they, as your buster DPS, want to give everybody those overcharge stages. So, you know, if you're using them with a Merlin, you get more stars back, or a Klianskaya, they get more NP back from their own overcharge. And so it kind of lets arts play that in a more streamlined way. You don't have to look for some random art servant with an overcharge effect on their NP or their skill, or you don't have to use Demonic Bodhisattva that only works once, or even the Amakusa CE that only works 3 times. You kind of just have a nice streamlined option that you can always bring out, and that's going to perform rather well. And again, it's another party-wide battery, which not only helps your main DPS, but it also helps Castoria get to her NP as well. Which, if you think about it, the charisma from Castoria and Proto Merlin is going to give the entire party a 50% battery, which is kinda nutty. And then finally, there's her first skill. I mean, this is quite literally just hero creation, but arts. Instead of a buster buff, you're getting an arts buff. You're still getting max HP. You're still getting the 100% crit damage for 1 turn on the 6-turn cooldown. It's good. Pop that on your servant whenever you want to do a big crit, or whenever you just want to fire your NP in general. Speaking of crits, though, there is Lady Avalon's NP, which is doing all the generic good stuff that you would want. You're going to be getting 3 to 5k max HP depending on your NP level, and no, you do not have to go for NP 2, 3, 4, or 5. NP1 is perfectly fine as someone that has been using her for the last 2 years over on the JP side of things. And NP1 Proto Merlin is good enough to get the job done, although she also does scale the NP regen rate based on her NP level, and so getting anywhere from 5 to 10% NP every single turn is a little nasty, kind of like what we were talking about earlier where you slap Prisma Cosmos on your Proto Merlin, she's getting 10% back every single turn, then 5% from the passive, and then if she's NP5, she's getting another 10%, a quarter of her NP every single turn. That's definitely a little bit gross, a little disgusting. But again, getting the 5% NP for the entire party and the 3k max HP buff is still perfectly fine. You will still get a lot of power from that. It'll definitely help out your art servants a lot in keeping them extra consistent while also providing them with extra stars. As you can see, her overcharge effect is anywhere from 5 to 25 stars every turn for 5 turns. And again, remember, she already increases that by 1, so usually when you're firing the NP, even if she's the lead, she's still going to gen 10 stars a turn, which is not nothing. Or if you want to be a real maniac, you put her at the end of the chain and just see how many stars 25 a turn really is, especially if you slapped a 20-30 on your Proto Merlin or your Castoria. Suffice to say, this servant is actually very simple. You may have been hearing about this servant coming out, especially if you're a newer player and expected them to have all these, complex gimmicks and everything. And I know I said I wasn't going to compare too much to Merlin in this video, but realistically, it is just Arts Merlin. They took a year 1 servant, kind of converted them to Arts a little bit, changed some things here and there, but effectively repackaged the servant so Arts units could get the same power that Buster units were getting as far as sustainability was concerned. And yeah, she's really simple. Pretty much, you're going to load into a fight, you're going to click the 3rd skill, get her NP rocking, and just try to maintain as many stacks of that as you possibly can. Whenever skill 1 and 2 are down, you're just going to pop those anyway to give everybody the fat NP. I mean, the attack buff might be the most inconsequential effect between the 1st and 2nd skill, because giving everybody the 20% NP so everybody can spam their very, very strong NPs, your DPS, whether it's Summary Buki who's about to come out, or maybe it's a Muramasa who's going to get additional stacks in, maybe it's a Melusine for the NP gain stacking, whoever have you, your DPS is going to have some powerful effect to keep spamming. Then Castoria is just debuff cleansing everybody, constantly giving big attack buffs, constantly throwing solemn defense all over the place, and then Proto Merlin is throwing stars, NP, and HP everywhere. I mean, the overcharge and the NP effect over there are probably the best things she's doing, because they just make your Arts teams flow like a well-oiled machine. Now, is she a must summon though? The only thing on this is that technically, if you have your own Castoria, you could always just bring a friend Proto Merlin. Now, this doesn't work for advanced quests, and it doesn't work for, say, any of the ladder events where you have to kind of use your own servants. They don't let you use any friend servants. It's not as good for those, but for 90% of the other content in the game, you can always just bring a friend Proto Merlin and get along just fine. I mean, that's what I did on JP until I pulled my own Proto Merlin. But I would say her priority goes up more and more if you do not have your own Castoria, because then if you have Proto Merlin, you can bring a friend Castoria, and you can actually farm using her as kind of a substitute for that friend Castoria, because she still gives the massive arts buff, she still gives you the overcharge effect, which might come in clutch if your Looper is somebody like Muramasa who gives himself an arts buff on his overcharge buff. Getting that additional arts buff for damage and NP refund on your arts cards might actually help you out as well in being able to get across the finish line. So she's predominantly going to be a unit that you want to use going into CQs, but I still use her as a substitute for Oberon on my JP account. I mean, one thing you can do now that Black Grail is available, you can have your Castorias dump all of their buffs onto your main DPS, and if they're not looping very well, you can plug suit out one of the Castorias for that Proto Merlin, then immediately give them the big arts buff. They've now got a staggering 150% arts buff from just your supports alone, not including their own, and you've got that additional 20% battery from Proto Merlin in the back, and you can also still fire her 3rd skill in farming nodes to try to get her NP going, so you also just get additional NP every single turn. So not only is she really good in CQs, but she can really help out weaker accounts that don't have as good a arts farmers and helping to get them across the finish line, because she can kind of hold their hand through the remaining nodes, because not only are you going to have double Castoria, but now you can plug suit in Lady Avalon. Again, I think she well earns the title of a must summon servant. Just evaluate your box and see if you want to go for Ruler Scotty first, or maybe you want to bag Summary Buki Ibuki because maybe you do already have Castoria, and getting what is arguably the best arts AoE servant in the game right now, or getting the arts Merlin is better for your box. Especially because someone like Summer Ibuki, if you want to make her your main looper, you probably do want to go for NP2 on her. In my experience, that has helped me out a lot after I've gotten that second copy on the Destiny Order summon that happened over on JP recently. But we'll cover that more in Summer Ibuki's own video. So with all that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you going to be going for Lady Avalon immediately? Do you have enough Saint Quartz saved up? Let me know all that in the comments down below. Hopefully this serves as a catalyst for you guys. I won't be stealing your luck, not yet anyway, because I'm saving all of my Saint Quartz for Ruler Scotty. Somebody's gotta be the defender of Quick, and you know what? I'll just take up that mantle myself. Also, if you found the video to be informative, I would appreciate a like on the video and maybe even a subscription. And do not forget to check out LD Emulator, which is linked down in the description down below, so you can start playing FGO at 60 to 120 FPS. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.